If you didn't already know, I am a huge Dragon Age fan. At the time of recording this, Dragon Age Veilguard is literally days away from releasing. But did you know that there are 6 novels that partner with the whole Dragon Age video game series? I'm not talking about the graphic novels, there are separate comics and graphic novels. I'm talking about proper novels to read. 6 of them. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different on this channel, and I'm going to share my passion of the Dragon Age franchise with all of you guys by introducing you to all of the novels. So, whether you're new to Thedas or whether you're planning to replay all the games again and you're looking for a new way to experience them, sit back, relax, and let's dive into, in my opinion, the perfect order to read and play the games and the novels, and describe loosely and as spoiler-free as possible what the books are. What are they? What are the books? What do they include? This video will contain minor spoilers, so if you're wanting to come into this like super fresh, you're new to Dragon Age and you don't want any discussion of the books whatsoever, you can look at my recommended read/playlist in probably the pinned comment or the drop down underneath this video, but if you want to stick around and listen to why I think these need to be read and played in a certain order and what they include, then let's get stuck into it. So the first book in this series is The Stolen Throne, written by David Gaider, who is the OG writer for the Dragon Age franchise, or one of the OG writers for Dragon Age. Set before the events of the first game, Dragon Age Origins, The Stolen Throne follows 3 protagonists, Maric, Loghain, and Rowan, on their quest to restore peace from the clutches of a tyrant who now sits upon the throne. If you are an existing Dragon Age fan, you probably will recognise the names Maric and Loghain, as they are key players in the politics of Dragon Age Origins, specifically Loghain as a character that you may or may not interact with in the first game. So as far as lore goes, this novel is a really good introduction to the world, the tone, and the politics of Thedas. This is the only book I don't actually own. It was lent to me a very long time ago by my friend Jodie, who introduced me to the Dragon Age books because I didn't know they existed. Jodie, if you're watching, I love you. I hope you're doing good. I remember the first time reading this, it was a very enjoyable read. All of the Dragon Age books are fairly digestible. They're not like, the Brandon Sanderson level tomes, but they're also not sort of short novellas. They're all, I want to say, from like 300 to 500 pages each, something along those lines. Personally, I would say that The Stolen Throne is a really good starting point, whether you've played the games or you're looking to start the games or the books. I think this is probably a mandatory read if you're wanting to get really stuck into the world of Dragon Age. So I really recommend starting here. We'll go through like my proper list of orders of games and books at the end. I'm going to introduce you to all the books first. But this first book, The Stolen Throne, really sets out the events that play into all the way through the Dragon Age games, because Dragon Age Origins has such a good jumping point, right? That it's a great first game to play, and this book really does a good job of introducing you to that experience, and yeah, we'll get more into it later on in the video. Okay, so the second book in the series is The Calling, also written by David Gaider. Now this book takes place not long after The Stolen Throne, but still before the events in Dragon Age Origins, and once again it features Maric, and Loghain does feature a little bit in this, but Maric is kind of one of the key players of this. This time, however, he is joined by a group of Grey Wardens. This Grey Warden faction is a very key faction throughout the Dragon Age franchise, specifically in Origins. So this is a great jumping point, again, before you play Origins, to understand who the Grey Wardens are and give you a little bit more depth into the history of that faction. Grey Wardens have a shorter lifespan because of the Calling. It's a very important part of their lore in their faction. I won't go into details why, just in case people want to get more stuck into it. But the fact that this only happens to a Grey Warden at the end of their lifetime, and yet a bunch of Grey Wardens are hearing it now when they're in their prime, is giving them cause for concern why they're hearing the calling so early for them. This really sets nerves on edge, as it could mean the beginning of another blight, which is a big part of Dragon Age franchise and especially Origins. So Marek and the Wardens go out on their quest to discover the source of this calling and going deep into the depths of Ferelden, figuring out what is going on. And you're introduced to a massive cast of characters, including enemies who are very interesting for the franchise. The Calling might actually be my favourite book of the entire novel series, to be honest. I was a bit sceptical coming into the read because, full disclosure, the Grey Wardens I personally don't find as interesting as other factions in the game. I think because I've played Origins to death, I feel like I've been there, I've seen it, I've done the Grey Wardens, but this book really, really got me. I was just so pulled in by the characters, the lore, the drama. By the end of this book, you will want to, if you haven't already, you will want to go back and replay Origins, because this book, and Inquisition. Reading both The Stolen Throne and The Calling will make you want to replay Dragon Age Origins if you've already played it, because it adds so much more depth to Origins. Honestly, if The Stolen Throne is a mandatory read, The Calling is whatever the step up is. Like, it's a crime not to read, if I'm, like, my opinion. If you only have time to read a couple of these books, I would say The Calling has got to be in that pack. Like, if you've got time to read like 1 or 2 of the 6 and you're not wanting to commit to a whole 6-book series, man, this book not only does this have crucial lore for other novels, but there's some really big reveals in this that play a part in Dragon Age Origins and Dragon Age Inquisition. The Stolen Throne does also have pivotal plot points for Dragon Age Origins, but The Calling I feel like extends further than the first game, so that's why it's so high on my list. The third book in the series is Asunder. At this point in time, this is the last book in the franchise written by David Gaider. This book takes place not long after the events of Dragon Age 2, so we skip ahead across the games, and after the events of Dragon Age 2 is Asunder. It focuses on the growing tensions between the Templars and the Mages, which is a theme already explored in Dragon Age 2, but this sort of amplifies it and gives it more depth. The book also features some familiar faces from Dragon Age Origins, such as Wynne and Shale. If you have one of the Dragon Age Origins DLC packs that includes Shale, you will find a familiar face in this. But more importantly, for the future of the games that you play after this, maybe, it introduces the character of Cole, who appears in Dragon Age Inquisition, so it almost is a prerequisite to his character. I'd say this book is more of a character piece. It focuses more on the people than the events, though the book does really well to set up the ongoing conflict and struggles between the Templar and Mages, which is explored more in Dragon Age Inquisition. It is a very dramatic read, though I will say it's not mandatory in my eyes. I think it does well to set up some things in Dragon Age Inquisition, and if you are interested in the aforementioned characters of Wynne, Shale and Cole, then I think you'll really appreciate the story, and it wraps up some loose ends to those characters, which I won't spoil. But if you're ever wondering, what happened to them after Dragon Age Origins? Definitely read this one. Okay, on to the fourth book, and that is The Masked Empire. This is written by Patrick Weeks and takes place just before Dragon Age Inquisition. This story is set in the beautiful country? A beautiful part of the world called Orlais, which is France in Dragon Age terms. It follows 3 key characters, Celine, Briala and Gaspard. Some of you may recognise these names if you have played Inquisition. These 3 characters feature prominently in one of the main quests in Dragon Age Inquisition. I love that we finally get more airtime for Orlais, because honestly a lot of the books and the games up until kind of this point and Dragon Age Inquisition have felt very Ferelden-y heavy, although we know of different places across Thedas like Antiva, Tevinter, Orlais. This is the first time you kind of really are able to get stuck into that different part of the continent, so I really appreciate getting to explore a different part of the world. This book really does dig deeper into the politics, the rivalry, the romance of it all, so it's very much more romantic than I feel the other books are because of the setting of where it takes place. This story gives so much more context into that main quest in Dragon Age Inquisition, and whilst, again, I don't feel like this is a mandatory read, I definitely recommend it because it adds so much more colour to the characters and the events that happen in that quest line, and it will give you a far better understanding of the experiences playing the game, especially when you go to the ball in Dragon Age Inquisition, so it adds just that little bit more. This also touches on some other characters within the world, one of which is, I won't spoil anything actually, but there's another elvish character that you meet in this book who I personally feel like is a really strong character, and I really enjoyed his introduction into the series, and it kind of teases some elven lore that may or may not be touched upon during your time in Inquisition, and I'm assuming into Veilguard, depending on well, not depending on. There's lots of elvish things happening in Inquisition, and I'm assuming Veilguard because of... You know. If you know, you know. I'm not going to spoil it. Da 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 da! The Last Flight. Okay, so we're going to go on to the 5th book now, which is The Last Flight, written by Liane Merciel. I hope I'm also pronouncing all the names correctly. I apologise if not. So this book actually pops back and forth between two timelines, the 4th Blight and the beginning of Dragon Age Inquisition. So the 4th Blight is before, I think, even the events of the Stolen Throne and the Calling. Please, Dragon Age fans, correct me if I'm wrong. But it's like it's an earlier Blight in a time long gone. The story follows a couple of characters, the first of which is a mage who is researching the 4th Blight and comes across records detailing the last Griffin Riders from that period in time. We get a first-hand account of the last Griffin Rider, which is the second point of view and second character that you're given in this book, and her story during her days as a Grey Warden. This story focuses primarily on lore surrounding griffins and the events of the 4th Blight. It has some nice details, so if you're interested in that period of time within the franchise, then it's a cool book to read as a nice little companion to that time period. I would class this as an optional read because it focuses more on the lore surrounding the Blight, the 4th Blight, and the Griffins. I think this is probably gonna be relevant to Veilguard because we're introduced to the first Griffin character in the game. So that might be a nice little read beforehand or as you're learning more about the Griffins, if that's your thing. But personally, I'm just less interested in that side of the lore. That's just me. But yeah, this is a nice little read if you fancy digging in deeper to any of those topics. The 6th, and at present, the most recent Dragon Age book in the Dragon Age universe is Tevinter Nights, written by a whole lot of people. Patrick Weeks, who wrote The Masked Empire, contributes to this, but it includes a load of talented BioWare writers who have worked on or across the Dragon Age franchise, because it's actually a different book to any of the other books we've seen so far. It is a collection of short stories. Short stories. I cannot speak. So this anthology takes place across Ferelden, but it does have more focus on Tevinter. I think because the next game in the series is set somewhat in Tevinter as far as I'm aware. Again, at the time of recording this, I have not played any Dragon Age Veilguard. In fact, I've tried to stay far away from it so I don't get spoiled. These stories are set between the end of Dragon Age Inquisition and what I'm assuming to be the beginning of Dragon Age Veilguard. It does a really good job of wrapping up a couple of loose ends from Inquisition, as well as introducing and warming you up to the world of Veilguard, as there's some key characters from Dragon Age Veilguard that are mentioned, some in a lot of detail in these stories. I absolutely love this book. Genuinely love this book. I love the format. I found it so easily digestible to just read a short story a day or at a time. I love that we're introduced to a load of different characters. We get to see familiar faces. We get to be introduced to new factions or revisit factions that we haven't heard from in a while. And I honestly feel like this is such a good read ahead of the Veilguard release, or ahead of playing Veilguard, because I think there's a lot of stuff in here that will have relevance to Veilguard. I could be wrong, but it definitely feels like this is a good primer before playing it. Some personal favourite stories from this book would be Down Among the Dead Men, The Streets of Minrathous, The Wigmaker, and Eight Little Talons. So there's a really quick introduction to each of the 6 books, so you kind of get an idea of the content in them, the focus, where they're set. And now I wanted to go through, in my opinion, the best way to experience reading all these novels alongside playing the games. Imagine, if you will, you're starting from scratch and you want the ultimate Dragon Age experience. This is what I would personally recommend. So, number 1, you're going to start with either doing the Stolen Throne and the Calling back to back. In any situation, I feel like you want to have pretend I'm holding the Stolen Throne. It is stolen from me. So pretend this is the Stolen Throne for a second. You want to read the Stolen Throne and the Calling back to back regardless. But here's what I'd recommend. Read both of them and then play Dragon Age Origins, or play Dragon Age Origins, see if that's the kind of game franchise you're actually vibing with and you want to learn more about, then read The Stolen Throne and The Calling. But after that, I'm fairly sure you'll then want to replay Dragon Age Origins because of the context. So it depends what your priorities are. If your priority is just to get into the Dragon Age franchise and you want to start with the first game, then you can start with the first game, read the first 2 books, or you can read the first 2 books and then get into the game. So it totally depends, but I would definitely say read them as a pair together no matter what. Then what you're going to do is you're going to play Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2 is a bit of a weird one because I really enjoyed it. I think a lot of fans really enjoyed it. I think it gets often overlooked at times, but it's very crucial for the rest of the whole series. So then after you finish playing Dragon Age 2, you're going to read a butt ton of books, okay? After Dragon Age 2, you're going to read Asunder next. And then you're going to read The Masked Empire. Now, you could swap these if you really wanted to. The reason why I've put it this way is it feels more chronological. Asunder wraps up some of the Dragon Age origin threads, but it does introduce the Mage and Templar friction that can be quite prevalent at the beginning of Inquisition. So you might want to read this to then get that freshness. However, the Masked Empire kind of only is to do with Inquisition in terms of games. So this is why I'd recommend doing Asunder first to wrap up any Origins threads, and then you're going to go with the Masked Empire and feel fresh for Orlais whilst keeping in mind the conflict that's going on. Then you're going to play Dragon Age Inquisition. And you're going to have a great time. You're going to finish the Trespasser DLC. For the love of God, if you need to get any DLC, play any DLC of the Dragon Age franchise, play Trespasser. Trespasser is mandatory. End of discussion. Okay, you finished Dragon Age Inquisition and Trespasser. You're going to read The Last Flight. The Last Flight, a little bit of a palate cleanser, gives you something different, and also hypes you up for Griffins. Then, lastly, you're going to read Tevinter Nights, and you're going to love it. And if you don't, that says more about you than me. I'm sorry. This is the ultimate hype man for Veilguard. And then once you've finished reading this, unlikely that you're going to marry Lucanus de la Morte, then you're going to play Dragon Age Veilguard, which comes out this week. I am not paid to say this. I do not work for BioWare. In fact, I work for a completely different video games company right now. But you're gonna do what I say. Okay, that is a very quick and dirty introduction to the Dragon Age novels and my recommendation of where to read them, in what order. So I really hope that this has been, at the very least, fun, maybe controversial. I'm not actually sure. I feel like this is quite a lukewarm take on where you should read and experience the Dragon Age novels and games, but hey, if you feel differently, tell me your recommended reading order, playing order in the comments below. Tell me what you're most excited about for Dragon Age Veilguard, because I've literally booked a day off work. I've literally booked a day off. I'm off Friday to play Dragon Age Veilguard. I have no shame in doing so. And if you enjoy video game content or want to get into game dev or enjoy things like LARP, most of my content is focused on video game and LARP content. If that's your kind of vibe, then feel free to stick around. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Go, I don't know, drink from a big mug of Darkspawn juice. Cheers!